Thank you. Without further ado, allow me to introduce the chair of this afternoon session, my dear colleague, CCG Senior Fellow, Mr. Andy Mark. Andy, the floor is yours.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the China-Europe Economic Cooperation, moving forward with the global quest for sustainability. Before we begin the interventions from our distinguished panelists, we're first going to watch a short video by Mr. Cui-Ming Mo, who is the president of China Association for International Economic Cooperation, our forum co-organizer.
尊敬的各位领导、各位嘉宾，大家好！很高兴参加中国与全球化论坛。在此，我谨代表中国国际经济合作学会对论坛的顺利举办表示热烈的祝贺，向参加论坛的各位领导和嘉宾表示热烈的欢迎。中国国际经济合作学会是商务部直属的全国性社团组织，专门从事国际经济合作理论和实务研究，参与制定中国国际经济合作政策，为政府建言献策，推动企业走出去，参与全球化进程，为企业开展跨国经营提供信息和人才培训，推荐经贸理论和实践经验。学会自1983年成立以来，紧紧围绕国家开放战略的需要，积极服务国际经济合作大局，认真贯彻实施走出去战略，推动企业参与“一带一路”建设，充分发挥沟通政府、企业、高校和科研机构的纽带和桥梁作用，为推动和促进中国对外经济合作事业的发展做出了积极的贡献。自2015年开始，与全球化智库联合举办了7届中国与全球化论坛，每次论坛都深度聚焦全球热点话题，精准把脉经济全球化发展趋势，前瞻性的设置全球化议题。论坛的举办极具意义。当前100年未有之大变局与新冠肺炎疫情叠加，民粹主义、保护主义和单边主义兴起，地缘政治风险加剧，全球经济面临空前下行压力，全球经贸活动和其他领域的交流活动减弱。此时再次举办中国与全球化论坛正当其时。本次论坛参会嘉宾多元，既有国内政产学研界人士，也有国际前政要、驻华使节、国际组织代表参会。通过中外嘉宾的交流讨论，论坛将为凝聚共识，推动全球化向更加开放共赢的方向发展发挥建言献策的作用。在严峻的国际形势下，中国正积极构建以国内大循环为主体、国内国际双循环相互促进的新发展格局，坚持实施更大范围、更宽领域、更深层次的对外开放，而且此轮开放是在新的更高水平上进行。中国不断深化国际经济交流合作，维护多边贸易体制，同时营造市场化、法治化、国际化的国内经商环境，持续推进贸易自由化、便利化。虽然全球化发展在广泛的领域中面临挑战，但更应看到其中蕴藏着大量机遇。 全球在数字经济、绿色经济、基础设施建设、服务贸易方面合作前景广阔。全球化不会停止，但全球治理赤字亟待解决。为此，我们需要维护世界的多极化，并推动国际体系改革和全球性问题的治理。希望通过在本届论坛上嘉宾的思想碰撞，为解决全球化出现的问题找到解决的思路和有价值的观点。祝愿本次论坛取得圆满成功。谢谢大家。
Thank you, Mr. Cui, for that video to start us off. I'd also like to offer a special thank you to Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for making this roundtable possible. So let's get started. Despite a weak global recovery hobbled by the protracted pandemic, economic cooperation between China and Europe has remained robust. China's trade with the EU in 2021 amounted to $828.1 billion US, up 27.5% year on year, hitting a record high. With global uncertainties on the rise, relations between Brussels and Beijing are increasingly locked in the true complexity of interactions among great powers in tackling the global challenges. As discord over human rights issues and economic practices persist in the bilateral relationship, and the comprehensive agreement on investment remains frozen, many fear that the conflict in Ukraine could further jeopardize any future cooperation. The EU and China, as the world's second and third largest economies, share a responsibility in upholding the global free trade system and other forms of multilateral cooperation, especially on achieving sustainable development and Paris Agreement targets. While the Green Deal begins to reshape the European economy, what Beijing prioritizes in its carbon neutrality plans will have considerable impact on socioeconomic-technical exchanges between China and Europe for years to come. As the two primary markets dedicated to boosting green and digital transformation, what are the possible pathways to cooperation between China and the EU? So that's the topic we're going to discuss today. And we have, as I mentioned, a distinguished, highly experienced, and thoughtful group of colleagues to address this topic. Before I call on our first speaker, I would like to share some of my own thoughts on this that will help us frame our discussion today. William Shakespeare is viewed as making the greatest and most enduring contributions to the canon of literature in the English language. Given his importance, his life and work are widely studied and analyzed, so we can not only better appreciate his work, but also understand why he is great. Many academics cite his remarkable ability to create new words as the explanation for his stature. For example, well over 2,000 of our words in English today are first recorded by Shakespeare, either plucked out or invented by him. But I contend that the actual source of his greatness lies in his ability to truly and deeply understand people from every station of life, from the noblest monarch to the plainest commoner, and every personality type, from the naive and soft-hearted to the worldly and calculating. In fact, what makes him great then is his empathy. A famous American movie is based on a line from one of Shakespeare's sonnets. Love is a many-splendored thing. And like love, sustainability is a many-splendored thing. It is also a many-faceted thing. The UN World Commission on Environment and Development provides a broad definition of sustainability as, quote, development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. But we usually view sustainability mainly through the lens of the environment, because a basic assumption of sustainability is the idea that resources are finite and should be used conservatively and wisely with a view to long-term priorities and consequences of the ways in which resources are used. However, sustainability is a multi-splendored and multifaceted thing. Besides the economic facet, which is explicitly recognized by the United Nations, we must also consider the political facet, both domestic and international, as well as the human facet. Without solutions politically acceptable to domestic and global constituencies, which can be sustained through transfers of political power, sustainability can't, well, be sustained for very long. Similarly, ultimately, sustainability requires in its essence a willingness by individuals to behavioral changes to effect lasting change. Moreover, especially in the case of China and Europe, there are many different types of players at times pursuing different objectives, seeking to express different values and holding different beliefs about how the world should work and how it actually does work. And so this brings us back to the idea of empathy, and in particular, strategic empathy and its opposite, strategic narcissism. In the words of a former American military leader, strategic narcissism is the tendency to define challenges to national security as we would like them to be, and to pay too little attention to the agency that others have over the future. On the other hand, strategic empathy calls for imagining the hopes, dreams, desires, and fears of others. A chess player only has to foresee his opponent's moves. One practicing strategic empathy has to leverage the desires of others to create positions that will win friends, supporters, and allies. The gift of empathy is a purely human attribute. It does not come from our senses. It comes from our self-awareness. Most animals have keener senses than we do, but their strategies are limited to flight or fight because they lack this depth of self-awareness needed for true empathy. They cannot imagine the range and varieties of desires that we humans can. Good strategy begins with our ability to imagine the range and variety of desires in others that allows us to accomplish our own goals. Both China and Europe have recognized the multi-splendored nature of sustainability. They also have recognized the complexity in its multiple facets and how it encompasses so many human differences. Only through the application of strategic empathy can these differences be bridged. What made Shakespeare great was not his verbal virtuosity, but his ability to truly understand so many varied characters and facets of the human experience. By cultivating our own empathy, we can also achieve a measure of greatness in moving forward in our global quest for sustainability. And it is in this spirit that I would like to kick off our interventions this afternoon. So our first speaker this afternoon will be, here's my list here. Starts with J, George Woodka, who is the president of the European Chamber of Commerce, as well as the senior executive for BASF in China. George, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Andy, and thanks for Henry and Mabel inviting me. It's wonderful to be here again, particularly meeting old friends such as Zhongping and Sun Yongfu, with whom I've worked for 20 plus years. It's wonderful to be in this setting. Well, today, actually at 3 o'clock, my colleague, Bettina Schön, Vice President of the European Chamber, will launch our new business confidence survey, basically testing the pulse of our members about how they feel about China. So this study will be downloadable after 3 o'clock from the Chamber website. You don't have to be a member, it's free of charge. But I can tell you the survey actually was conducted in January, February. So obviously the result was very positive. Last year was a great year, double-digit growth for many of us. And then the double whammy happened. Two black swans met in March and February. And all of a sudden we had the Ukraine war as well as COVID. And that made it different. We launched subsequently, in order to rectify this, another survey, which I launched on May 5th. And that actually just shows that how shocked the European business community is about Ukraine war. You have seen that many companies have withdrawn from Russia, as well as, of course, the kind of damage the lockdown did. And many other chambers, including the German chamber, has done great service in order to get that message across. In a way, stay tuned on this one. So we have a bit of yin and yang and black and white at 3 o'clock about the business looking back sort of and where we are right now. And I hope Bettina manages to get a good outlook into the future. So let me speak first of all about trade. Trade is indeed wonderful, as Andy pointed out, but it's a bit lopsided. We are the biggest trading partners, but Europe is selling into China 600 million euro every day. And China sells by now nearly 1.4 billion euro every day. So in a way, China is twice as more independent on the European market than we are on the Chinese market. Frankly, we want to get more and more engaged there. We want more openness. That's part of why the chamber is existing. And just the last 6-7 months have shown an incredible export success story coming out of China. China grew in essence year on year between 20 and 30%, whereas European exports into China actually was hovering around 0, 1%, -3%, and so on. So there seems to be something going on that we find difficult to define. Either the Chinese market has closed up more, or Chinese producers have substituted European importers. We haven't come to a conclusion yet. So that's one part of the engagement story. The other one is, of course, totally different. It's European investment in China is huge. It's very deep, has been longstanding, and is very committed. In the survey we have done here, our members clearly state that they are not leaving China. They're considering to put up new investment elsewhere. That's a big difference. And when we ask them, are you laying off people? I think the vast majority said we are not laying off people, meaning they hang on to this kind of well-educated engineers they have built up over the years. So that's a good sign that we think that we can come out of the woods, but we are not there yet. In a way, European business clearly states that they find China more unpredictable. There seems to be always this kind of complete focus on the economy, growth, job creation, and so on. Now, all of a sudden, we have zero tolerance, we have COVID. That certainly is anti-job creation. And that we are struggling with because it comes with huge unpredictability. We have not seen an exit strategy. We have not seen how China comes out of that. And this unpredictability that goes across the nation. Today it's maybe Beijing, yesterday it was Shanghai, whoever is going to be next, is of course a major concern. And the kind of inability or unwillingness to vaccinate everyone. China is definitely vaccine naive. And nobody knows it better than Dr. Schwartländer from the German embassy. He's our immunologist. Makes it very clear that actually China cannot open now. It would be irresponsible to open now. It would cause havoc to the medical system. But again, there's a clear solution to it. Just have a lot of vaccinations going on, have a good mix of vaccines. mRNA, of course, comes to mind because the next mutation is not going to wait. Germany just rolls out a new vaccine for BA4 and BA5. And Omicron is just a different beast from the Delta. So we urge strongly the Chinese government in order to not just do testing, but strong vaccinations. And there are many details attached to this, how this can be done. So talk about Shakespeare. Thank you very much for this lead up. I think Shakespeare was not aware of two words that I learned recently. One is nearshoring, and the other one is friendshoring. So nearshoring means that you possibly are having your facilities not far away from Europe. You want to have a closer Turkey, North Africa, or Eastern Europe. And friendshoring means that you are friendly with a nation, same ideology, same ideas, and that might change actually the way companies are picking partners in the future. It was now sort of the most economical, biggest cluster, the best market view. Now all of a sudden companies might actually look at, so what is a friendly country? So where's the country where I don't get criticized for investing? And then I look for a good partner there. There seems to be a strong tendency happening there, which of course is uneconomical because we should not really focus on where business makes more sense, but it's just a simple matter of fact. So beside this paper, I launched another one in May, and that is carbon neutrality. I had the privilege of handing it over to Prime Minister Li Keqiang myself. And it's about cooperation possibilities. In today's discussions, there's so much discrepancies that I was very strongly looking for topics where we find common ground. And there's no topic better than climate change. China stands for 25% of global emissions. It burns half of the coal globally. So we have to be with China in order to make a difference. And that's why European business is important to be here, to build carbon neutral factories, to come up with new systems, new technologies, and frankly, to learn from our Chinese partners of doing that in the course. And the second topic, I don't have a paper I launched just 10 days ago. I don't have a copy with me, is research and development, the knowledge pipeline, Europe and China, where we can both gain. It has been interrupted a bit because of recent legislation. The data transfer law makes research very difficult for us to do over here. It has virtually no impact on development, on being closer to customer solutions. But we have the cybersecurity law, of course. So in a way, the R&D is on everybody's mind, and 80%, nearly 80% of our members say they want to do more. But if you look behind the surface, you see that actually willingness to do basic research in China has been waning, fading away, and strong emphasis on working with customers because that's where China is good at. So R&D is very important to us because China has an incredible engineering pool. As a matter of fact, when it comes to engineering, if you look at the top 100 universities globally in the field of engineering, China nearly has half of them. China is incredibly weak in medical university. I think 1 out of 100 was just in China. But in engineering, that's where absolutely you find your sweet spot. And hence, that's where our companies are thriving in research and development. China is frankly, in this respect, a huge fitness club for us. So in my own, and I finish then, is chemicals. I'm heading a chemical company, and you know, chemicals is 40% of global production is already now in China, and every indication is that it will be 50% by 2030, and that's what leads my company to put up these huge projects, such as the $10 billion project in Zhanjiang. We have no intention of changing that. As I always try to say, you know, if you're in chemistry, not in China, it's like if you're not at the table, you're going to be on the menu. You have to be global by being in China in this respect. But it is, again, I talk from the experience of my own company, sometimes very hard to explain why we're here. Just today, Xinjiang came up. US has handed out a list. My company happened to have 2 factories in Xinjiang. Of course, we go through all the kind of hoops and loops in order to explain why we're here, what we have done. That's squeaky clean. We invited media. We've done an external audit. But again, this kind of friendshoring has a relationship with this one. I don't have to do this in other countries, what I have to do over here now. And that makes business processes more complex and more expensive. So Xinjiang is a big issue for us in business. Supply chains, we have to prove it now. How do we prove it? We don't have auditors that are willing to work in Xinjiang. And so it's going to be a big challenge. When I left the prime minister, I said to him, the most important thing, I guess, now is the human touch, the human relationship. And that's to your point with empathy, strategic empathy. Because China's nowhere. If you look in conferences, if you look at G19, is it nearly, China's missing from the global forum. And that's a great pity because China's leaders should go there to explain the issues. Online is staged, it's not the same. And we need our top politicians to come to China to understand it better, and the rift is widening, unfortunately. So I was very happy when MOFCOM Minister Wang Wentao went to Geneva. That was really a breakthrough. Important that he's there. China's voice is not only being heard, but he's also being seen. We need this kind of engagement, otherwise misunderstandings are rising. We need this kind of empathy because frankly, the world is not waiting for China. Thank you.
Thank you, George. So a very timely update from the front lines of European business. And I think your point that we are in a period of not only uncertainty, but really in a new world. And a new world requires new concepts and new words like nearshoring, friendshoring, and I'm sure there'll be many, many more. I'd like now to turn to one of my Chinese colleagues, Sun Yongfu, who was Director General of the European Affairs at the Ministry of Commerce. And in that role, he oversaw China's bilateral and regional economic and trade cooperations cooperation policies with Europe and Eurasia. He holds a PhD in environmental science from Peking University, as well as an MPA from the Kennedy School at Harvard University. Mr. Sun.
Thank you very much for the good introduction. As George Woodcock mentioned, we were friends for more than 20 years. As a matter of fact, he was the third time to be the president of the EU CCC. During my time, I was more or less more than 12 years of DG for European Department of MOFCOM. So we know each other and we exchange ideas and information, from time to time. In my term, I think EU is our #1 trading partner from the day one when I was in the office in 2003, at the beginning of 2003, until my retirement in 2015. And EU was China's #1 trading partner for 13 years, at least. And starting from 2020, China became the #1 trading partner also for the EU. So the relationship, especially in the trade and economic relations, is the most, I would say, the most important sector of our bilateral relationship. Although the Xinjiang, so-called the human rights problem, create a lot of difficulties in our economic and trade dialogue, especially for the BIT, the bilateral investment treaty, which concluded the end of 2020, announced by both our President Xi Jinping together with the EU leaders. But last year, because of the Xinjiang and because the sanctions from the EU Parliament, and also there's a strong response from the Chinese government. So that's created a lot of problems. It's still pending. The problem is that we are from both sides. We are still haven't found any, good ways to solve this problems. I think the BIT is quite important to our bilateral economic and trade relations, and I believe that the HED, which is going to happen this year, and I hope could find the good way, and the good compromise for both parties to find a way to really solve this problem, because it's really no good for European businesses and also for the Chinese. Although we have difficulty, as I mentioned, politically, especially for the Xinjiang problem, but the fact, as mentioned by George Woodcock, that both businesses have a very strong indication that the trade and economic relations are still remaining the most important part. And 90% of the European businesses here in China would like to remain, and less than 10% are considering to live in China because of COVID problem and some other concerns. And I can provide the new figures from my side, from the Minister for Commerce, that the first 5 years of the trade data saying that we have 3,405.19 billion US dollars of bilateral trade, with the increase of 8.8%. So still increasing. Last year, the increase was more than 27%. And investment, as pointed out by our EU CCC president, and from the European businesses, they are still increasing their investment here in China. The first 4 months data was that they have invested 5.7 billion US dollars to China, with the increase of 194%, very close to 200%. the investment from China to EU is very close to $2 billion US, with the increase of 13%. It's much less. I think because of the some problems here in China economically, and also the lockdown and the COVID-19 problems. I think Chinese government indicated very clearly, as mentioned by George Wood, they had a meeting quite recently indicating that China is very much open, much more widely to the outside world. I think that's very much received by the European businesses, although they have some difficulties indicated by the white paper of the EU CCC, and we refer every year of those complaints, and that's also I think contribute to the the movement of China towards more openness. I think their reflection of those business communities from EU is very good for the Chinese to have their improvement in the opening strategy. So what I mean is that I still have the hope that both Chinese and Europeans will continue to have their dialogue, not only online, I hope will also would, in person, so that we can have exchanges and dialogue. I also, in line with what have Mr. George Wood mentioned, we have a lot in common, especially carbon neutrality and research and development, and the new and electricity cars, for examples, and some sustainable development like the wind power and solar power, for example. We have a lot. So what I mean is that we should increase the cooperation and should have a good management of those so-called economic competitions. And if we have a fair competition, I think it's good for both companies. And the Chinese, we don't like the rival, but we have our means to control it. I think we have to have the limitations of those rivals, which have some obstacles for our good cooperation. And we believe the partnership is good for both sides. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So as we've heard from Director General Sun Yongfu, that there is a complementary parallel desire, as George Woodka shared with us, to work more closely with Europe. So the desire certainly is there. If we can address some of the practical problems, some of them short term, of course, with COVID, but also some structural ones as well. So Joseph Cash is the policy analyst for China-Britain Business Council. As a political and strategic affairs advisor with specialist knowledge of the UK's relationship with China, Japan, and the members of ASEAN, Joseph has extensive trade policymaking experience, having worked within the multilateral frameworks of the B7 and the B20, Business Europe, and with Japan's negotiating team, and the Keidanren during the UK-Japan CEPA negotiations. He also is a contributor to a recent CCG book. Mr. Cash.
Thanks, Andy, and it's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the China-Britain Business Council. And it's great to also have been invited to a China-Europe Roundtable, as I'm aware that we're no longer a member of the European Union, but we consider ourselves to be a member of the European continent and also European interlocutor with Chinese authorities when it comes to trade. And I'm not going to discuss business sentiment, because I'm aware that my colleague Rachel from the British Chamber is here as well, representing the UK. So instead, I'm going to address the point that you mentioned, Andy, about new concepts and sustainability and the multilateral order. And a kind of behind the scenes story that is emerging between the UK and China, which is particularly interesting in this field, is how the pair are converging in the multilateral trade space. obviously, we are moving towards a new dynamic of Asia-Pacific trade with the launch of the RCEP and the CPTPP recently. But that's confusing for smaller economies like the UK. And why is this linked to sustainability? Well, one has far higher standards in terms of environmental protection, in terms of employment, labor law, and operating a business in a sustainable, green and fair way than the other. That one is the CPTPP. And there is what I call free trade disagreement. I published an article on this topic last year, where I pointed out that regulatory divergence is appearing in trade policy. So for example, with sustainability, you have the RCEP, which is a US-style trade agreement, which does not touch on sustainability or environmental protection at all. And you have the CPTPP, which offers the gold standard in terms of trade policy worldwide. You also have European FTAs with Asia-Pacific nations. So most recently being with Vietnam in 2019, which included far-reaching clauses on improving Vietnam's sustainability contributions. And the same clauses were then featured again in the EU-China CAI, which unfortunately is currently on ice for various reasons that have already been touched upon today. And it will be interesting to see over the coming years which of these two agreements wins out, if companies and countries begin using the terms of the RCEP more, or if they move over to the CPTPP, which demands more of them, but would probably be better for the planet in the long term. So we'll have to watch and wait and see. The UK and China are both trying to join the CPTPP, so that would be a helpful nudge in that trade bloc's favor. And hopefully, the Asia-Pacific can become a bulwark of a sustainable future for trade going forward.
Great, thank you very much, Joseph. Indeed, we need new concepts as well as new problem-solving approaches. Next, we'll have Ibrahim Chowdhury. Am I saying that correctly?
Recording in progress.
So Ibrahim is the senior economist for China based in the World Bank's Beijing office. Prior to joining the World Bank, Ibrahim spent 3 years at the executive board of the International Monetary Fund. He also has central bank experience, having spent half a decade at the Swiss National Bank in Zurich. He received his PhD in economics from the University of Oxford. Ibrahim, please.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's truly a great pleasure to participate in this year's annual China and Globalization Forum. I would like to extend my gratitude to the Center for China and Globalization for the invitation. I would like to offer a few thoughts on China's role in global trade, but my remarks will be less on trade in goods, which is all too well known, but I'd like to focus more on China's role in services trade, a facet lesser known to many. China's branding as the factory of the world often hides its rising prominence in services trade. China is the world's largest trading nation, a position it gained more than a decade ago. The reforms that led to China's WTO accession 20 years ago initially brought access to foreign capital and technology, which rapidly translated into growing export competitiveness, which in turn increased the demand for commodities and intermediate inputs, making China today the largest trading partner for the majority of the WTO's 164 member countries. So clearly China is a crucial market for many countries, including many developing countries. This became apparent in the aftermath of the global financial crisis, when China's large domestic stimulus triggered a boom in commodities that helped the developing world emerge from the crisis far quicker than the advanced economies. Policymakers in China have repeatedly emphasized that in a consumption-based growth model, the services sector will need to assume a greater importance. A recent report by the World Bank titled "At Your Service, the Promise of Service-Led Development" shows that services are increasingly driving economic transformation. In fact, half of workers in low and middle income countries are currently employed in the services sector, and they have become more productive since the 1990s. China has made major strides in boosting the size and performance of its domestic service sector. Sustained gains in income capital levels, demographic changes, and rapid urbanization all explain the rising importance of the domestic services market. Services accounted for just under 55% of China's GDP in 2020, up from 44% a decade earlier. While the pace of change has been rapid relative to other countries, and services in China are now the leading source of employment, particularly of female workers, China's service sector still has significant room to grow. The sector remains relatively small for its income per capita, reflecting the continued dominance of export-led manufacturing. With the rise of the services sector across economies, the world's trade structure too has been changing. Services today comprise a growing proportion of nations' trade baskets, with varying impacts on their current account balance. Trade and services can assume many forms, including international transactions, as varied as a consumer buying a foreign movie to watch on a computer, or a supermarket chain selling products through a foreign branch. Despite its growing importance, trade and services sometimes receive less airtime in conversations on global trade, yet account for the majority of trade in many developed economies and are playing an increasingly important role for many developing economies as well. This is perhaps because services are less tangible, often require real-time interaction between service providers and consumers, and are subject to complex layers of regulatory oversight. China's services trade integration has deepened steadily over the past decade. As the world's third largest exporter of services, China's exports of services stood at about $145 billion in the first 4 months of this year. This marks an increase by almost 30% from the same period last year. Similarly, China is also the second largest importer of services globally. Its service imports reached around 150 billion year to date, a 20% increase from the same period last year. China's rising services trade growth and the greater sectoral diversity of its services reflects its status as the world's leading supplier of manufactured goods and the goods services linkages that flow from China's manufacturing prowess. Technology has been a key factor in expanding services trade, but technology alone will not be enough to reap the full rewards of services trade. While China has made much progress in opening services market in recent years, for example, by revising the negative list on foreign investment, limitations continue to prevail and are found on restrictions to foreign entry, limitations on cross-border data flows, barriers to competition, and restrictions on the movement of people. These in turn contribute to the suboptimal performance of China's service sector. So how can policymakers lay the foundation for a more dynamic and modern service sector? The short answer is through pro-competitive policies, developing the skills base and human capital, and regulatory reforms. Lowering barriers to services trade and opening key services sectors to foreign providers would encourage competition, drive innovation, and productivity growth, both of which are key to facilitating the process of economic transformation in China. It would also ensure Chinese consumers and producers have access to higher quality and lower cost services. Addressing restrictions in the country's data governance framework for qualified services to engage in cross-border data transfers would open up opportunities for services exports and imports. Reducing restrictive barriers and services will require parallel reforms in regulatory governance, not least to reduce levels of regulatory uncertainty often identified by both foreign and domestic investors as critical for sustainable business operations in China. China can also demonstrate leadership in advancing services trade liberalization at the regional and global level. China's 14th five-year plan, which devotes considerable attention to the services sector and to services trade, are important signals that service liberalization is high on the authorities' agenda. The RCEP, which we just heard about, and China's application to join CPTPP offer important platforms to advance deeper commitments in areas including services liberalization, digital trade, and intellectual property. To conclude, China's own role in the global economy has continued to grow in the past 2 decades. With such growth comes new responsibilities. Just as China benefited from open markets in other countries, it has become increasingly important as a market for others. It is vital that China's market opens further so that the benefits of cross-border trade and investment continue to spread to other countries. This will benefit Chinese consumers just as China's exports have benefited consumers around the world. And it will allow Chinese producers to move further up the value chain. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim, especially for bringing to our attention the importance of services, which are only going to become more important as we move into an increasingly digitized world, and cross-border trade and services will grow as payment platforms like the digital yuan, Alipay Plus, make it easier to sell services around the world. Thank you. So let me now turn to our next speaker, Alan Gabor, who has been the president of Merck China and the managing director of Merck's electronic business sector in China, where he's responsible for developing and driving growth strategies, as well as building on Merck's 353-year presence and reputation. Before joining Merck, Mr. Gabor spent 25 years at Pfizer in leading roles, where he directed the launch of many of Pfizer's innovative medicines into China and opened the China Regional Investment Center. He has also been awarded the Magnolia Award twice by the Shanghai municipal government. And Mr. Gabor will be joining us online from Shanghai.
Andy, thank you very much. And dear friends at CCG, it's good to be with you this afternoon. Unfortunately, I couldn't join you in person because of some travel restrictions here from Shanghai. But I do want to thank CCG Director Henry Wong in particular for the invitation. As a background, Merck is a science and technology company focusing on healthcare, life science, and electronics. And we're proud to say that we have 89 years here in China, starting in Shanghai at the Peace Hotel. We've been continuing to invest during the pandemic for life science and semiconductors alone. We've committed another 200 million euros in Jiangsu province. And at the same time, we do see a number of challenges and some residual long-term effects that have been noted by the prior speakers. If we look back on one of the surveys that Jörg referred to by the German Chamber of Commerce, a large number of the German companies said that their ability to operate was restricted to less than 50% of their production capacity during the recent pandemic. Now, we understand that. It's got a huge impact, but it is what it is. What's more disturbing is that 38% of the German companies saw their foreign talent leaving. And here, Merck is no exception. Like other companies, of course, we faced serious supply chain disruptions and great difficulties, especially with staff rotations during the pandemic. As we are both in the semiconductor and biopharma industries, we are a critical supplier to virtually all leading international and domestic companies in China. And unfortunately, our ability to timely and smoothly supply our key customers who are located all across China in every single province was significantly disrupted during the lockdown. And specifically, I refer here to the critical components used in the manufacturing of biopharmaceutical products. The good news, those operations are running again, and we're more optimistic. However, in the near term, as was pointed out by Jörg in the very beginning, there's a fair amount of uncertainty that the disruption could and most likely will happen again. And here we just need a clearer plan forward that was referred to as an exit strategy, but something that we are looking for as well as a business. Now, looking longer term, I can see that Merck's talent development strategy is severely impacted by by what we have just experienced. The minimum 3 months on the ground training that we require for our global Merck electronics executives has come to a halt. These are senior people who spent 3 months working, living with us in China to better understand how China operates, and to use your words, Andy, to develop a level of empathy for how China operates on a daily basis. Now, by 2023, unfortunately, we also expect China, our expats in China, to decline by approximately 2/3. And here, this is impacting our top leaders in the company who have Asia Pacific and global roles, simply because it's almost impossible for them to do that from China. And as expected, the living in the bubble has had an effect on many people, ranging from mental health challenges to levels of increased anxiety, tension, and restlessness. This is particularly concerning for people who are involved in high-tech operations and the focus on safety that's required there. Now, taking a more broader view, we do share the concerns that deteriorating economic conditions and less predictability in the business environment in China is eroding a level of confidence that we've had for many years. The supply chain disruptions, travel constraints, the increasingly inward turning of some China industries are just among our major concerns in the Chinese market. We recognize, frankly, that in combating the pandemic, we are living in a truly globalized world where the spread of the coronavirus cannot be decoupled between countries. China's domestic and international travel restrictions pose the real danger of throwing the country into a tangible isolation with the rest of the world. For the greater good of the whole human society, where empathy is needed more than ever, it's urgent that China work with the rest of the world to reestablish mutually acceptable and feasible ways to restore the people-to-people engagement that was so vital to our mutual success. Now, despite all the uncertainties at Merck, we are very committed to building on our 89 years in China. We recognize that the Chinese market is beyond what is obvious potential market, and would rather highlight China's innovation ecosystem contribution that has made significant global contributions in so many areas. Merck is committed to smart localization, including actively establishing partnerships and integrating into the local innovation ecosystem. Our new investments in China have shown that China is front and center in Merck's ambitions and our multi-year investment strategy. Let me just highlight two very briefly. First is that we established Merck's Advanced Semiconductor Solutions site in Zhangjiagang, and this site will achieve climate neutrality by 2024. It marks the single largest investment project for Merck's electronics business in China. Secondly, for our life science business, we recently announced an investment of 100 million euros that will strategically expand our global footprint from Wuxi to enhance the flexibility and speed of development in the biopharmaceutical industry. Both of these investments are intended to improve the local capacity, supply chain footprint, and the innovation that we support in China. Now, for the topic today of sustainability, Merck is very committed to our environment and sustainability in every country that we operate, and China is absolutely no exception. This is clearly represented by our new investment in Zhangjiagang, where we strive to achieve China Green Factory certification and China 3-star rated green building certification, as well as the more stringent standards to achieve the LEED Platinum for our office building at that location. Safety has been a top priority at Merck, and we're aware that June is the safety month, National Safety Month here in China. And it's even more important under these conditions that we operate today to keep that as a top priority. In terms of European relations, in Europe, as was said, policymakers and the general public's view of China has changed markedly throughout 2020 as the crisis for the pandemic unfolded. Under the very difficult situations, European and Chinese leaders could focus on areas of practical cooperation, like vaccines in particular. Second would be the mutual removal of travel restrictions that would greatly promote the China-European trade and people-to-people exchanges. From the development of the CAR-T platform for oncology, the COVID vaccines, to the rollout of 5G and electric vehicles, online payments, and artificial intelligence, the innovations across these multiple disciplines continue to push companies from both China and Europe to further and faster into the future. The world is evolving fast, and so shall we. It's time to concentrate on concrete actions that where we can seek common ground and carry out cooperation that benefits everyone mutually. In closing, big thanks to CCG for organizing this forum. It's this kind of channel that is important to bring the voice of the business community to the stakeholders. And I would like to say that we're very proud that Merck China is enlisted in the top 10 foreign invested companies by CCG's Blue Paper. We highly appreciate the consideration and treasure that acknowledgement. And I sincerely appreciate the chance to hear the distinguished speakers today. Thank you very much. Thanks, Andy.
Great, thank you, Alan. Alan, thank you for reminding us of the importance of human resources in everything that your company does, and every foreign company, in fact, every company in China has to rely on, but not only human resources as a commodity input, but the human dimension to it as well, in considering the emotional and mental health aspects of dealing with public health crises like COVID. And also thank you for sharing with us Merck's milestones in terms of investment in semiconductors and in life sciences. Clearly, we can see these new notions or these new ideas, as Joseph Cash mentioned, and as Georg termed, nearshoring and friendshoring. There's all kinds of shoring going on these days. Let me now turn to Cui Hongjian, who is with the China Institute of International Studies. He's a senior research fellow and director of the Department for European Studies there. He served as first secretary and director of the Office of Political Affairs in the Chinese Consulate General in Mumbai, India, and the Chinese Embassy in Jamaica. He has published over 100 articles and received his doctorate in international relations from Peking University.
Thanks, Chair, and also thanks for this opportunity provided by CCG every year, especially still now, as we know. I take a big value of this opportunity to share some points with all of the participants from all sectors. So because I'm from a think tank, so maybe a little bit different of the starting point to jump into this discussion about how could we look at the future of globalization, and especially how could we moving forward for China and Europe. But I have to remind all of us that now maybe the pressing issue for us is not moving forward, is to stop any kind of tendency of moving backward. So how to stabilize this cooperation between China and Europe, especially in the very, very, negative background. Also, in China, we've always said that the misfortunes always come together. I still remember last year we discussed some issue here about how about the negative impact from COVID-19, and this year we have to face a situation that not only COVID-19 and also now more and more geopolitical impact on so-called globalization and also China-Europe cooperation. So I think now we need to try to find out more certainties, especially from the policy environment, and how about this, influence from other issues, namely geopolitical and also uncertainties of policies, just like my neighbor, Mr. Woodick mentioned. I think now we have to, realize some, so far, some not so favorable issues or problems for us. So I have to start share my points from a little bit pessimistic point. As we know now, the very, very big issue for us is, besides the COVID-19 and now the Ukrainian crisis, it is strengthening a kind of, tendency of deglobalization. Because for those people who are anti-globalization, it looks like they have some more reasons to do something to push forward this kind of deglobalization. Because of the, as we know, fragmented of regional cooperation, and also even maybe more and more uncertainties for politics and some other. Another very big issue is in the background of the, so many negative impacts. We have to face a big problem is how about the competition between some issues. Even before the COVID-19 and also before the Ukrainian crisis, for example, for China and Europe, we are trying to find some more opportunity by working together in some issue like the green economy and the digital economy. But how about now? Regarding to the green economy, green transition, recently we witnessed the failure of the climate change talk in Hamburg, Germany, which give a very, very negative signal that once we try to continue this green economy, green transition direction, we have to insist the political discourse of climate change. We need to keep the climate security from any kind of challenges. But now, as we know, for Europe, for most of the countries and also for European Union institutions, they have to try to keep a balance between, especially in financial sector, to keep the balance between how to support Ukraine, how to impose the sanction against Russia. And on this regard, undoubtedly, this green transition, green economy, have to go back or, lower on this agenda. Another very big opportunity for China and Europe, as we know, the digital economy cooperation. Unfortunately, just like Mr. Woodick mentioned that some European companies, now they are facing some maybe uncertainties from Chinese policy to deal with COVID-19. I think for Chinese companies or investors, they are facing another kind of challenge from Europe is they have to realize more uncertainties or more unpredictable factors in Europe in a certain way. Why? Because recently we find that more and more a lot of regulations or rules from European Union on digital economy. So how could Chinese companies, investors, they understand what's a real trend for European side to have a more open market for the new commerce or new technology, or just have more and more, benchmark or more preconditions for Chinese, of course, not only Chinese companies. I think especially for digital economy, as we know, the biggest suffering will be for American companies. But for some more Chinese companies, especially for digital economy, they have to have some more worry or suspicion about the openness of European market. Another, I think, big issue is how could we understand the very, very big influence or impact of this kind of transfer of focus from a geo-economic cooperation to geopolitical confrontation. Now people have to rethink about what does it mean for interdependency economically. As you know now, it is a very hot issue for countries is weaponization of trade, weaponization of technology, weaponization of the investment. So how could China and Europe, we can give some answers to all of these questions is, once there will be a choice for China and Europe, we will go to choice the side of we will also go back to a geopolitical confrontation by giving up the geo-economic common interests. So we have to answer this, all of these questions. Another, I think, very, very big issue is how about this, China, EU, or China, Europe? Of course, we need to, realize some changing reality. And then we have to, upgrade our mindset. We have to find out maybe a kind of a reconnection. We understand, as I understand that maybe the change of the priorities for both two sides. So we need to find out some new solutions for firstly, more mutual trust, and also maybe a reshape of the construct of the common interests. So now the question is how? So I think that, yes, for China and Europe, if we look at the ongoing Ukrainian conflict or Ukrainian crisis, we can make a conclusion that comparing with other players, major players or powers in the world, and China and Europe were the most constructive power, even no any destructive. Okay, we still insist multilateral cooperation. We still try to put geo-economic cooperation on the top position of the agenda. So on this regard, how could we do something? So I think, yes, we need to rethink about what's a real meaning for China and Europe of the interdependency and connectivity. As we know now, in some European countries, or even for some think tanks there, they are working on an issue that maybe for Europe, once there's some more autonomy, which means that Europe have to give up or say goodbye to any kind of interdependency with other economies, just like they are going to do with the energy relations with Russia. So how about maybe in the future? Another question for Europe is it has to give up the very deep and also beneficial independence with China. So I don't think that it's a natural logic to translate what happened in Russia and Ukraine into Asia Pacific and China. So I think that also, if we go deep, the kind of a cultural difference, I don't think that China has the same mindset to look at maybe today China have to deal with a very complicated situation in Ukraine, and tomorrow China have to deal the same situations in Europe. I don't think China has this kind of, as we know, not so flexible. So how could we find out a combined or common interests in future, especially in the current very difficult situation And of course, I agree with some colleagues mentioned that we need some new dynamics, or even we need some new concept. No matter RCEP, CPTPP, once they still no way out for the CAI, I mean a comprehensive investment agreement. So how can we do something in a more pragmatic way? And also, of course, hopefully, I think especially from a business cycle in Europe, represented by Mr. Wood here, to have some more influence on European Parliament, to help them, to help the METS to understand the real benefits for China and Europe cooperation, not only just in the frame of the investment and how about the future. So short term, mid-term, long term, how could we keep a balance between all of these, as we know, conflicting interests, and also at the same time, still, I try to have a more optimistic conclusion is, even now we are facing a lot of the challenges, uncertainties, but once we try to stabilize our current, benefits model, and even we try to provide some more creative solutions, and not only for this, go back to a piece of Europe, and also more stable Asian Pacific region in future, even by working together with Europe, between China and Europe. I think everything is possible. It depends on how could we insist our confidence. Now, I stop here. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Cui. You pointed out to all of us that key actors in the world are facing hard questions as we unfortunately are moving from a world of more about geoeconomics to geopolitical questions. In particular, as we see more and more things being weaponized, financial systems, energy sources, et cetera. And these really are posing some difficult challenges that we all have to find ways to address in a systemic fashion. Thank you for that. Next, we'll have Feng Zhongping, who is Director, Institute of European Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. He's also former Vice President and Research Professor at the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations, also known as KICR, but visiting scholar at the Harvard Center for European Studies, as well as at the Department of Politics, Durham University in the UK. Professor Feng received his PhD at the Department of History in the University of Lancaster. His research focuses on the EU, Sino-European relations, and NATO. He's the author of many books and papers in both Chinese and English. Your phone, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Colleagues, good afternoon. It's always a great pleasure to come here to make some, to share some thoughts about China-European relations. I have enjoyed, listening previous speakers, the points they made, it's difficult to summarize the China-European relations in one sentence. Trace right, last year we fight pandemic is extremely difficult for our relations. But who knows, the conflict is actually emerging. And I got the impression, our relations has been increasingly interrupted by external factors. It's not just our bilateral factors. Problems is there all the times. We have different political systems. If you look at the European Commission's China policy paper, human rights and others, Hong Kong, there are a lot of disagreement between us, but we have enjoyed a strong trade economic link for the past decades. Director Shou Yunhu is right. China, European Union becomes China's #1. 6 Central Eastern European countries joined the European Union. You see, that makes a difference because there are 10 countries suddenly joined the European Union in 2004. So that makes a big difference. And the Brexit also affect our trade relations because the UK is a strong power, a powerful economy. When UK left the European Union, also Dongmeng passed over the European Union, became China's #1 in 2020. But we are still, most important trade powers. We still need each other. So how to really evaluate our relationship? I do appreciate, our business communities in both China and Europe who wants to carry on our relations. They say the dependence from both sides. They think China is a big market, and they think China potentially is become more important. But at the same time, geopolitical issues do, make some negative impact because people started thinking about, can we rely on China so much? So that is the question has been being asked by people in Europe. We do have similar downs here, because people have come to realize value issues becomes more and more important in Europe. I remember, when the Europeans are coming to China, normally in the past years, they strength for the corporations, commercial interests. We have difference, I mentioned. But now, you don't know when to start. All the headlines is uphold our values and the interest. So that means, it's not just coming to do business. And before Joe Biden came to power, before Putin launched the special military action, European countries already think China is a systemic rival in 2019. That was agreement among all the member states. It's not just one Brussels invention. We take this seriously. This will inevitably affect our relations. So, normally in normal time, Chinese officials, Chinese top leaders need to have more dialogues, communications. Tell European counterparts, China is not a security threat to you. We are too far away. But pandemic prevents this from coming. Have a video dialogue means diplomacy is nothing. If we can have talk, we can do business diplomacy through video. Why should we send our envoys to other countries to stay there for years, to have coffee, spa, beat? Why? To make friends, to explain. Why European ambassador even told me, The leaders spend 3 days, sometimes weeks, travel to another country. The most valuable moment is 3 minutes. It's not 3 days. It's in the corridor, even without interpreter. Eye contact, say we need to cooperate. That's a turn. They said face to face. That makes the visit, 3 days visit, weekday visit successful. Believe it or not, I believe. So pandemic, we must quickly end this isolation. I mean, we isolate each other. We cannot go to Europe. Europeans cannot come to China. I talked to a colleague who is working on Germany. I said, look, the German new chancellor, the first Asian visit is Tokyo, not Beijing. This is not fashion at all, because Merkel traveled to China almost once a year. I was told, thinking about the pandemic, he couldn't come. So he chose to Tokyo, because Tokyo have no this kind of restrictions. I don't know this is true or not, but this makes a difference. So I really want to take this opportunity to say, we need to step up communications. We need to overcome a lot of, difficulties to talk to each other. Second, we need to really encourage our business people to do everything to maintain our cooperations. Interdependence sometimes become dangerous. It's because the political factor is working. So that means, we need to explain, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Feng. Clearly, we all have seen this seemingly endless series of exogenous shocks or external factors affecting China-EU relations, and the conflating of values and interests certainly may make it harder to reach productive settlements than if they were perhaps separated. But certainly completely agree that greater communication at all levels is very, very important. So let me now turn to Linda He. Bear with me for 1 second here. Is president of Weilian Group. In addition to being a successful business entrepreneur, she is dedicated to global philanthropy and building bridges between China and other cultures. She founded the National Youth Orchestra of China, which is performed at Carnegie Hall. She is also vice chairwoman of the Chinese American Association, a trustee of China Institute, and a visiting scholar at Columbia University. And Ms. He will be joining us online from Shanghai.
各位尊敬的 CCG 的朋友们，感谢那个王博士的邀请，很高兴可以通过在线的方式可以跟大家讨论。主持人现在可以听得清楚吗？
听得见。
可以啊，好，我现在是在深圳，没有上海。 然后确实是在那个新冠疫情的蔓延和贸易的不断加剧的这个和地缘政治的影响的新常态之下，越来越多的企业呢采取了海外的。OK， 声音有点，看一下。 一方面呢，就解决产能过剩的问题；另一方面呢，能够实现品牌的影响力，还有海外的扩张。在中国常态疫情防控和争取实现碳中和的目标的背景下，这个战略呢显得非常的重要。我这里分享几个数据，根据普华永道的报告显示，美国的并购市场 非常火热， 2021年交易额达到了2.593万亿美元，比前一年增长了102%。2022年依然保持增长的趋势。消费市场、能源、金融服务、工业制造等都是并购交易的热门的行业和赛道。根据2022年中国资本海外投资并购报告，中国资本的大量的海外投资事件中，整个的北美的占了55%，大部分的投在了美国。欧洲的并购市场也表现出强劲的增长。在2021年上半年，欧洲并购市场交易量同比增长59%，达到了5000多宗交易，交易的总值是增长了111%，交易额达到了4961亿欧元。整个的宏观经济背景比前一年有了很大的改善。此外，欧洲的并购活动也受益于美国的 SPAC 融资的激增。在北美2021年半年就筹集了1117亿美元，超过了2020年的总和。在2021年，欧洲最大的20宗并购案中，有8宗的买家来自于美国。欧洲并购市场对美国的投资人很有吸引力。与此同时，中国资本对整个欧洲的投资事件占中国资本在全球投资比例的只有12%。可以说，中国企业在海外并购方面，欧洲被低估了。中国企业在欧洲的投资并购远远落后。不过，根据安永的研究显示，在疫情之后，2021年中国参与欧洲市场交易增加了8倍，上升到了124亿美元，开始从传统的制造业能源向新材料、绿色能源产业升级转变。结合中国双碳的目标下，中国未来企业在海外的并购过程中间，应当注意低碳化发展，在能源、碳排放和脱碳等领域寻找高增长市场合作的机会。从以上的数据我们可以看到，应对中国国内产能过剩、人口红利逐渐消失、去中国化供应链外迁，中国应该坚持引进来和走出去并重，以高水平双向投资，高效利用全球的资源要素和市场空间。可以说，中国常态疫情防控和争取实现碳中和的目标的背景下的新的机遇。正如 CCG 之前的报告指出，中国企业走出去应当关注如何的参与全球的产业链、供应链，增加产控能，在自己自身的优势产业领域，以走出去加强国际合作，巩固国际供应链的市场份额。近年来，我致力于通过帮助供应链出海、并购，助力中国企业的国际化，帮助他们布局海外市场，发展加盟商，开拓国际市场。简单来说，就是前店后厂。中国有制造的后厂，那么前店就可以扩张到海外。一方面应对国内过剩产能，出海并购能够帮助中国的传统制造业创造新的销售场景。另一方面，通过海外并购，帮助海外的企业能够升级、优化营销环节，实现业务的双向增长。这样，国内的供应链就有了消费终端，中国制造的价值在全球绿色经济的推动下能够得以升级， 形成国内国外的有效联动。这里简单讲3个例子。一个呢就是是一个供应链的升级，就我们现在跟国内的一个服装品牌去对美国的1000多家传统的服装定制企业进行收购和进行优化它的供应链。另外我们还在做第2个例子，就是中餐的出海。我想中餐没有真正的实现它的品牌的一个海外的一个就是真正的一个实现海外的扩张或者说海外的一个影响力。那如果通过并购能够通过这些内部的一些那个一些那个就是菜本身或者食品本身的那个逐渐的这个就是渗透它就可以通过YouTube 很多的文化的对这个食品的一些那个解释就可以实现一些文化的融合和品牌的扩张。还有就是在2021年宠物市场也是有很大的这个提升，所以我们跟国内的一些那个创意家的一些那个小产品可以在宠物市场还有在零售市场实现一些那个海外的一些并购和扩张。我想在美国印太经济框架和疫情防控双重的影响下，确实会加大中国制造业的外迁和降低全球份额占比，但同时也是升级转型品牌化的契机。中国企业比以往任何时候都需要以开放的心态和全球化的视野实现转型升级。通过更好的利用国内国际2个市场2种资源，增强产业链和供应链自主可控能力，真正从挑战中找到机遇，同时也增加海外和国内的就业的机会。希望得到各位的指正，谢谢。
Thank you very much, Ms. He, for sharing those cross-border investment M&A statistics, as well as those very specific examples. So our next speaker will be He Weiwen, who was Deputy Editor-in-Chief of International Business Daily, Economic and Commercial Counselor at Chinese Consulates General in San Francisco and New York. He's a highly regarded expert on US-China trade and economic relations. He is also the author of the CCG report titled The Impact of the Crisis in Ukraine on Global Supply Chains and China's Economy. And He Weiwen will be joining us online as well.
Well, thank you, Andy. My great pleasure. And I'm grateful to CCG for inviting me to the China-Europe Roundtable. Due to time constraint, I will touch briefly a few points. Point 1, the current world turbulence merits greater China-Europe cooperation, supporting globalization. Now, the still rampant COVID-19 pandemic, the Ukraine crisis, and especially skyrocketing energy and food prices and high risks of world food crisis and debt crisis, and the widespread slowdown of the economy, and even the threat of stagnation or recession. And especially the widespread geopolitical tension have given rise to many suspicions that whether globalization is coming to an end, whether the world will fall into fragmentation. So China and Europe, as a firm supporter of globalization, should come together and support globalization in this current context. The second point, that China and Europe should go beyond our differences and work together to support multilateralism. We have differences and will continue to have differences, but that should not stop us from cooperating, from working together to support the common interests of the world people. A good inspiration came from the recent closed WTO Ministerial 12, which ended in Geneva on June the 17th. Trade ministers from 164 economy members fell far apart from their interests and viewpoints. Still, they tried to come together to hit the final package, Geneva package. After hours and hours of hard working, and finally they came together with very good results. So just as the WTO Director General Iwela said, we can come together across geopolitical fault lines. Now China and Europe should also come together across all the differences. My third point is we have differences, what we should do. I think the right approach should be based on bilateral relations on the UN Charter and peaceful coexistence. That means we should mutually respect territorial integrity and sovereignty, non-aggression, no problem, and non-interference of internal affairs, and equality and mutual benefit. So if we can do that, we can address our differences correctly. And also, I highly recommend that CCG could serve as a good, helpful instrument for enhancing China-Europe dialogue on differences. And the fourth point is we should try to build a free, open, inclusive, complementary, and resilient global supply chain. In this regard, there are two specific issues I would like to touch. First, we should pay great attention to the recent tendency of widening disparity of China-Europe trade. In the past, usually, China's exports to the European Union and imports from the EU constituted 2 to 1. We export 2 and import 1 from. But now, since the start of the year, things have changed. China's export to the European Union kept rising fast, about 20% rise over the first 5 months of this year. But China's imports from EU decreased by 7% over the same period. So widening. And China is not separated its case with Europe, but also a case with the world. China's imports over the first 5 months of this year increased only by 7%. And the total increase amount came from the rise of commodity prices, the world market, mostly the cereals, oil, and the natural gas. The imports of the high-tech or engineering goods came to a standstill. That's a big problem. We should try to work hard to increase imports, including imports from Europe, because Europe enjoys very good advantages in high quality growth. That's point one. And the second is we should work together to improve the investment environment in China. I have been blocked in Shanghai, locked down in Shanghai over the past 2 months. And so I fully agree and share the feeling of President Alan Gabor of the Merck, their sufferings. And I think that things are improving fast. And the factories are running again, and logistics are improving. We are coming back to the shops again. During the past few months, complaints and recommendations of foreign business, including from German business, contributed positively to improvement of China's business government work. And we hope that we will work together and share opinions and suggestions to improve China's investment environment together in the future. And we are sure that for the latter half of this year, China's economy will pick up and more travel and the travel restrictions will be cut down drastically. And we hope positively to the future. And we hope to work together with European companies, with European business community, improve our relations and improve the world globalization together. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei Wen. So like Dr. Cui, you posed a difficult and hard question, is globalization ending? But shared with us that we are not just the passive recipients of the answer to that question, but we can actually shape the outcomes as long as we have practical and realistic approaches. Thank you for that. Our next speaker will be Jens Hildebrand, who leads the delegation of German industry and commerce in Beijing as the delegate and chief representative and managing director of the German Chamber of Commerce in North China. Since 2020, he has also been the Asia Pacific coordinator of the Asia Pacific Committee of German Business. Jens.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I try to be quick. I want to echo some of the pessimism Mr. Tsui and Mr. Feng in their statements made. I think advancing economic cooperation between China and Europe won't be easy, and we have to see that we balance this for German companies. Of course, as we make the major share or chunk of the bilateral trade, the major share of investments here in China, and also the largest business community among European countries, that's especially important to find a good approach and way to move forward. But however, what cannot be underestimated is really the effects of the Ukraine war and what this made with China, with the European Union, and especially with Germany. As you know, our Chancellor came forward and talked about the Zeitenwende, a turning point in history. And it's really the first time for many decades that we see that German people, German politicians, but German economy is also willing to suffer economic costs for reducing dependency on Russia in this case. But this all reflects, of course, also very much on the discussion that is going on in terms of China. And as you may know, the German government is working on a China strategy, a new one. And I think Jörg has said it before. I mean, the three things, China being a cooperation partner, a competitor, and a systematic rival, the focus has very much shifted on the latter two in the last month, especially. And when looking at the new China strategy, I think the government will very much look at the topic of dependency, supply side, but also market side, what that means for German companies. As you all know, we have these big German automotive companies here that make a major turnover share of their global business here. The second topic is, of course, diversification. If you talk to German ministries now, all of them are engaging with other countries in Southeast Asia and Asia at the moment. I think national security is also a topic that's connected on the dependency supply side. And Germany is also working on a national security strategy at the same time. And the topic of cooperation is really then the one that is a little bit stands behind, and where there's still a soul searching going on of what actually, apart from decarbonization, are the other topics we can cooperate with China. I mean, health could be such a topic, agriculture, mobility, sure. But I think a recalibration of the cooperation with China will take place. So last but not least, what does that mean for German companies? At the moment, critical point in time with, you all said it, high uncertainty and lack of planability. And if we look as the German Chamber into what companies do at the moment, it's three things. It's risk management and risk assessment, that for sure, for all aspects we've talked here about, supply chain aspects, Xinjiang aspects, whatsoever. A major trend in localization to pull really closer supply chain and suppliers to really counter decoupling, you could say. but more and more we are seeing diversification discussions. And as Jörg also said it, nobody will leave the Chinese market, but where to put your next investment, where to put your suppliers, that's actually the discussion is going on. And so this is, I think, a very critical moment for German businesses here, as the new German government is making up its China strategy. And I think it be really, as has been mentioned here before, important from the Chinese side also to give some signals into this discussion, be it in terms of COVID strategy, be it in terms of decarbonization strategies, how to cooperate and how to actually involve German European companies there. We've also just launched a decarbonization paper, also, or how really innovation cooperation could work, which is not easy. Some of you have also described it in terms of the difficulties and challenges, data protection, and so on and so forth. So as I said, it's a Zeitenwende, turning point, and it's very hotly discussed topic on how to approach with China. And as German economy is the strongest in the European Union, I think there will also be a lot of discussion, and a lot of countries will look at Germany, what approach Germany is taking on China, and then either follow or not follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen. So we certainly will be paying close attention as Germany releases its China strategy, and as you say, watch how that affects other countries in Europe and perhaps other countries around the world. Thank you. Next, we'll have Dr. Alexander Calwight, who is Chief Representative of the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, Beijing Representative Office. After he received his PhD in economics from the University of Cologne, Germany, he has worked in the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung since 1985. Dr. Calwight, please.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. As a matter of fact, I had the opportunity quite often to meet here outstanding Chinese and international intellectuals. I have benefited a lot of it. As you know, we face difficult times with overlapping challenges. And since a number of experts is here, could address more challenges like the pandemic, trade relations, the hiccups in the supply chains, I will concentrate on just one point, because I'm a think tanker representing a political foundation. So when I had talks with colleagues and representing the foundation in other parts of the world, well, I soon realized that what seemed logic in Europe caused a kind of bewilderment and surprise in many other parts, in many other regions of the world. How come that European populations and policy representatives reacted so strongly on the Ukrainian crisis, on the Russian move in Ukraine? And well, first of all, there are two simple reasons. The conflict is geographically close, and that drives migration into all parts of Europe. And second, one part involved is a nuclear power, which is a different dimension. But the third point is even more important to my understanding. And for that, we have to do a short glimpse in history. Europe, different from China, has never been a space with one central empire. It was always a space where medium-sized powers, 4 to 5, had a kind of permanent competition, formed coalitions for limited time. These coalitions changed, and we experienced military conflict in Europe for 500 years. And that culminated in the horrible wars of the 20th century. And only the Second World War, ending at the middle of the 20th century, brought casualties of about 25 million people. And then a new situation arose, and a situation with the first European superpower, the Soviet Union, and a divided continent, the Cold War. But the Cold War, lasting for almost 40 years, had even two very different periods. I would distinguish the 50s and 60s, and that was really confrontation, big armies standing on both sides, and a complete lack of confidence, and the feeling that the Third World War was extremely close. It got up for every moment. And then a second period that started about 50 years ago from now, in the early 70s, when suddenly both sides found it beneficial to negotiate. Mostly centered in the negotiations in Helsinki around what was later called the Conference on Security and Cooperation. And that was finished with the Accord of Helsinki 1975. And that is a long list of points that were agreed upon. I just quote a few: refraining from the use of force, inviolability of frontiers, territorial integrity of states, peaceful settlement of disputes. That was signed for the Soviet Union by Secretary General Gorbachev, Brezhnev, a strong man. And that accord was what in China is often called a win-win situation. The main gain for the Eastern Bloc was that disputed borders that had been drawn at the Yalta Agreement, 45, were formally recognized by many Western European countries, although they had not been invited to negotiate, to give their opinion, but even though they accepted these borders. And the main gain for the West was the understanding that all powers, including superpowers and big powers, would in the future abide to principles cited before. So we had the feeling that a new order had risen, where all countries would act bound by rules, like in a sports competition where all teams play, but they respect the rules for everybody. So that was kind of destroyed beginning on the 24th of February this year. So the general feeling in most European countries is we are going back in time. We are not going back to 1990, the end of history, Fukuyama. That's not the case. We are not even going back to the 70s. The 70s were still Cold War and big armies confronting each other. No, we're going back to the 50s. We are going back to the times of distrust, mutual, and we are going back to times where you cannot calculate your actions anymore because you do not have the feeling what will the other side do. And that is something that has changed the minds in Western Europe so much that what Mr. Hildebrand called the Seitenwende, or the tidal turn, the term, and that has even changed the positions of countries like Sweden or Finland that had maintained neutrality for a long time. And I would say Western and Central European countries are not, and that's maybe different, aiming at conquering territory or moving borders. What they want, what they seek is assurance that the set of rules agreed upon during the Helsinki process can be credibly restored. We want to live in a world guided by rules, not by brute power. So I feel that that conflict will carry on for a while. NATO General Secretary Stoltenberg said it might take years, hard to say. But it will end at a moment of time where no side sees the chance of, say, gaining anything by military. And then we'll have to negotiate again. And the rebuilding, the building up of new confidence after that will take time and enormous diplomatic efforts. The earlier that process can start, the better. And maybe the last sense, we in Europe hope that China will be a partner in rebuilding a rule-based order. And that would be what we expect and wish from China. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Calwight, especially for sharing that history of Europe with us. History is incredibly important for the Chinese. The Chinese intimately link history, philosophy, and politics. And I think the ability to really understand more of each side's history and how it influences their world outlook is very important. So thank you for that. Next, we have Nova Lee, is the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank Business Development Representative. Before that, she was the principal advisor to the president, the principal advisor to the managing director, Economics, Policy, and Governance Department, and started as a principal officer at the Corporate Strategy Department when she joined the bank in 2016. Nova.
Thanks a lot, Andy. I wanted to be a little bit upbeat here because I heard a lot of very gloomy kind of scenario already, and I do agree. Although from Yan saying that it takes a lot of soul-searching efforts on climate change agenda, but I do wanted to also agree with York. I know he's leaving, but also DG Sun and others that direction of travel on the EU-China relationship is still over the collaboration on climate change. And because both committed to the Paris agenda and also it actually represents a lot of opportunities for closer collaboration, including in third markets. So I would like to touch upon that. And I wanted to quote here the EU-China relationship fact sheet that was published by the European Commission during the EU-China summit took place in April. It states that the EU acknowledged China's efforts towards decarbonizing its economy, upgrading its nationally determined contribution ahead of the COP26. And to advance the international climate negotiations, the EU and China are reinforcing their cooperation in areas like carbon markets, long-term emission development strategies, clean energy and energy efficiency, low emission transport and cities, unquote. So indeed, I would say that even in a turbulent times, still EU acknowledges China's role on climate change and everything, and also it's in action. Like the People's Bank of China and the European Commission jointly launched a Sustainable Finance EU-China Common Taxonomy, which was from last year, but we found that we can see that over 70% of the taxonomy, in fact, overlaps. So there are a lot of areas that both sides could work together under this common taxonomy. And just as the European Union and countries in Europe is implementing its Green Deal, I think China is also advancing its pledge on also putting its targets into the country's 14th five-year plan. And I do believe that a number of initiatives that are launched on greening the overseas investments can also be complemented with EU's Global Gateway Initiative, for example. And for those know EBRD, we are a multilateral development bank, the EU together with its members as EBRD's largest shareholder. And China also became a member in 2016. And EBRD's mandate is to foster transition towards open market economies across countries between China and the EU, from Central Asia, Caucasus, Central and Eastern Europe to Middle East and North Africa. And green is absolutely the key priority of the bank. So EBRD could become an important multilateral platform on the collaboration on climate agenda. And I do hear a lot discussions over mistrust. Indeed, mistrust is damaging uncertainty as well. And I do believe that trust could be built over high standards. If you build high standards across the common taxonomy, then a lot of trust could be still maintained. And I do see that Chinese companies and financial institutions are very interested in cooperating with European partners on a lot of green investments and initiatives, and opportunities are huge. I think a lot have been mentioned on EV industry, on renewable energy side. From EBRD, we are supporting a lot renewable energy projects, not only through our investment, but also technical cooperation and policy dialogue. For example, we are supporting renewable energy auctions in EU countries and its neighborhood. We also work with project sponsors like quality Chinese investors, investing in those countries through very thorough project due diligence, very high social and environmental standards, through upholding EBRD's transition impact and qualities to ensuring those investments are of high quality, which could be agreed among our shareholders, including China and the European Union and other members in the same table. So I do see China and Europe is cooperating, of course, and competing in various areas. For example, in the electric vehicle sector, a lot has been mentioned. And I can, not only European companies are investing in China, I also see Chinese investors from the EV industry investing in Poland, in Hungary, in Czech Republic, and besides other Western nations. So going forward, I really hope that more in-depth collaboration between EU and China could happen, and progressing even more advanced in the climate agenda. And I fully agree with the previous speakers that all sides need to step up communication and stop isolation. I do thank CCG to bring us all together today to bridge the dialogue and understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Nova, and especially thank you for helping us understand more about AIIB and EBRD and the role that it plays. So now we'll have Liu Chang, who's Vice President of Nor-Bremse Asia Pacific, Chair of EU-CCC Government Affairs Forum. She's also a lecturer at the Beijing Youth Politics College and has 20 years of industry experience covering the world's top 500 multinational companies, government agencies, and colleges. Liu Chang.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mark. So distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm from Nor-Bremse, a German company in rail industry, and I serve as the chair of Government Affairs Forum of the EU Chamber of Commerce in China. And it's really my honor again to join today's discussion. And currently, international trade and economy has faced a very challenging period. With the constant changes of the international and external environment, the uncertainty and ambiguity exist all the time. And globalization is also facing a crossroad of history. In a series of studies and reports released by EU-CCC recently, China has been described as by the United States and other countries as a strategic competitor on different tracks in some areas. And several foreign companies also have decided to relocate their production capacity to other countries from China. So as the response to such mutual dependence crisis, we noticed that China has been accelerating the self-reliance and localization replacement in a few industries, as well as enhancing the autonomous and controllable capabilities in some sectors. So, meanwhile, most multinational companies are seeking to expand their contribution and participation in the Chinese market. However, anti-globalization behaviors may exert huge impacts now and to the future. In the survey, we found that the anti-globalization appears to be our political decision, but it will extend to 4 dimensions with far-reaching impacts. And the superposition effects will gradually emerge. The 4 dimensions are the following: economics and finance, supply chains and critical materials, innovation and standards, and data governance, telecommunication service as well. Well, enterprises for sure are the main bodies to bear the costs and risks for any potential decouplings. KB, the company I work for, was founded in 1905 and headquartered in München, Germany. Its core products are braking systems for real and commercial vehicles. And we have production bases all around the world in more than 100 countries and regions. Our business benefited greatly from the global market competition and from the globalization campaign in the past years. And the worldwide optimization of resources and the cross-region mobility of people and goods really benefits a lot to our business. And facing the potential negative impact, we will actively transform and remain committed to the in-depth innovation in China. And talking about innovation, we think this is the key of sustainable development in China and in the world. Here are some deep thinking on how to achieve these goals. So firstly, continue innovation and investigation in the production and R&D, especially in core competence that are independently developed in China. And KB will consider taking more mature core components that are developed in China for the next generation technology. Secondly, to realize digital innovation. And China is the leading world in digitalization. Digital innovations will not only benefit KB in our Chinese business, but also will support other business in our global market. And thirdly, to respond to China's national strategy of energy conservation and emission reduction. And KB also make the internal dual carbon target as the key performance indicator of our innovation. The goal is for all branches worldwide, including those in China, and to reduce their carbon emission by 50% by the year 2030 compared to year 2018. This is not just about KB's internal carbon emission of all manufacturing locations in the world, but also includes the upstream, downstream, and our customers and our supply chain of KB. So with the high expectation of China market, KB is engaged to deep innovation and has been making positive thinking about the future all the time. In order to counterbalance the negative impact brought by anti-globalization, KB expects to gain more understanding in the industry policy in China. So for example, how does the policy define and distinguish the deep innovation made by multinational enterprises in China and the independent innovation advocated by Chinese domestic companies? And what kind of synergy between the two? For example, independent innovation in China usually refers to the strategy advocated by the central government. Well, nevertheless, a multinational company uses China's core components and register its IPR in China. Can it be deemed as Chinese independent innovation? A clear definition of independent innovation would be very helpful. So, as to define the achievements made by China's globalization strategy, in this way, multinational companies will stay and continue to deep root in China to innovate in a deeper level. This is the best reflection of China's national opening up policy, which can effectively mitigate the negative impact of supply chain crisis and play a positive role in future participating in reshaping of global supply chain, and provide support on positioning of China's manufacturing industry in the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you, Tang, for sharing more about Knorr-Bremse and raising some very important practical questions about how China will continue to innovate and integrate through research in the world. So now we'll have Tian, who is Vice President of Beijing. So she joined Beijing in January 2021. and provides overarching leadership to the central market access, external and internal communications, and government affairs teams for Greater China. Dr. T has rich experience across the healthcare, nutrition, and consumer industries, both in China and internationally. Dr. T has also worked in the US and several countries in Europe, including the Netherlands and France. She holds a PhD in pharmaceutical science. Tian.
Thank you very much, Andy, for your very nice introduction. And also good afternoon, everyone, every participant online and also on the site. I'm actually representing the company named Beijing, which is an innovative science-based biotech company. And we were born in Beijing, but now we already become a global biotech company with the worldwide exposure. I would like to leverage this opportunity to share some of experiences we have and to show how important globalization and also sustainable development means for us, not only for the individual industry, but also for the worldwide patients. We were born in Beijing in 2010 in Changping district. At that moment, I think there was no independently developed innovative drugs in China. There were very limited global clinical trials and also very limited even clinical trials within China. So that was 12 years ago. But however, if you look at today, and China is ranked as the #2 the global innovation drugs in the world. #1 is US. And if you look at Beijing's story, and we appreciate very much the China healthcare policy reform, and we have already developed from the China, biotech company to become a global biotech company. And we have already worldwide exposure in more than 30 countries. And we also, last week, we officially launched our regional hub in Basel, Switzerland. And also particularly within Europe, we have already ran more than 40 global clinical trials within Europe and with 29 countries. And we have already enrolled more than 3,000 patients within Europe only, which represents 1/5 of our global clinical trial. So if you look at all the achievement the Beijing has already achieved, not only the Beijing as just one of the company among many, the Chinese company now is going abroad. And it's really we appreciate very much a globalization. And for example, one of our independent innovative drugs, anti-cancer drug named Brucansa, and this is the BTK inhibitor. And this drug was accelerated approved by US FDA 3 years ago. But however, just 3 years, and we have already, this specific products has been already, got 50 countries approval. And also we are expanding these drugs to the worldwide patients. And so we really, we have to say, the development of the industry and development of the company, we appreciate very much the globalization. On the same time, we also see the sustainability and sustainable development is very crucial for the industry as well. Particularly for the biotech company, the sustainability means for us is not only the efficacy of the anti-cancer drugs, the safety of the anti-cancer drugs, but also the affordability and also accessibility. For example, we have already launched 3 first-in-class anti-cancer drugs in China and with the global quality. But however, the price, it's a very, very affordable for the average patients, particularly for anti-cancer patients. And this commitment we actually is really not only to provide innovative drugs, but worldwide, not only for China patients, but also for the worldwide. So sustainability for us is really very crucial. And what we believe is the cancer has no border, neither do we. So only individual company like Beijing and only individual industry, our efforts are very limited. So we really need to work together and to contribute to the world, to the patients. So to that content, we appreciate very much our CCG's platform. We see this is one of the very important platform who actually is leading the efforts for the globalization, for the sustainable growth and development. And as a company, I think probably our company is very new for you, but I just heard Merck president give a speech beforehand. I think for the company like ours, the healthcare company, we are facing the cancer patients worldwide every day. There are so many touching stories every day, from every country, every corner of the world. So at the company, we see our responsibility to really facilitate and to support globalization and to really commit to the sustainable development and growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Xian, for not only introducing your company, but also giving us a deeper understanding of the development of the pharmaceutical industry in China. Next, we have Rachel Tang, the Deputy Director of the British Chamber of Commerce. And I apologize, we have two more speakers. I can ask if you can please be mindful of the time. We are running a bit over schedule, and I think we need to wrap up in a bit to allow the next event to take place. But Rachel, please.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, CCG, for inviting us to participate in today's roundtable and for including the UK in this discussion as well. We're really delighted that CCG has continued to act as a platform to bring open dialogues and discussions on globalization, on engaging China and the rest of the world, especially at a time like this. So first of all, when we talk about globalization in China, I guess we can't talk about it without mentioning COVID. The British Chamber applauded China's response to COVID since the 2020 outbreak. And the response to COVID has been really impressive. And however, so much of the world's production and companies' global supply chains are right now sitting in China. And we understand that the issue that China is going through right now, we understand that China is grappling with zero COVID strategy versus opening up its economy. And this is actually pushing business contingency plans right to the limit. At the end of the 2021, the Chamber launched a sentiment survey, and we can see that optimism was strong among businesses in the medium and long term, but it is the immediate horizon, so it's a short term, that is the greatest concern to businesses. Short-term business confidence has been hampered most predominantly by uncertainty in the recent COVID-19 outbreaks. 3 weeks ago, the British Chamber launched our 4th position paper, very similar to EU Chamber's business sentiment survey. The result is that our companies have diminished confidence, and we've seen a shift in business sentiment as a result of the outbreak. So what we need here is clarity and communications from the Chinese government to restore this confidence. What we're trying to highlight here is ensuring that access to public services, economic growth, and minimal disruption to logistics and supply chains are given equal priority in the development of strategies to contain COVID-19 outbreaks. So coming back to the topic of this roundtable, it's about global quest for sustainability. How are we moving forward with this? One thing to highlight is obviously the opportunities that China offers. I think British businesses still see China as has a massive market potential, and especially around climate action. So we're already seeing a lot of collaboration between UK and China on establishing ESG standards, in developing renewable energy supplies, designing EVs, offshore wind, green financing, etc. So businesses are seeing this as a mutual opportunity, and we all agree that combating climate change and collaboration around sustainability is what will unify and bring us closer together. The British Chamber, actually, we've been putting sustainability on the top of our agenda. Last year, we conducted a sentiment survey and found out that actually 70% of our members, they don't have a net zero plan. But that's not because they don't want to commit to decarbonization, it's just they don't know how to start. And so having a clear net zero strategy and understanding on how to convert the talk into walk is very critical for any business. We've embarked a journey to become the first carbon neutral chamber with a green chamber plan. And we've launched our journey to net zero a month ago. And we've really committed ourselves to measuring, offsetting, but more importantly, to reducing carbon in our activities and also our value chains. As a small organization, the Chamber, we're a very small organization, and we hope to continue advocating and sharing our insights around decarbonization, and hopefully we can encourage other small business and medium businesses to take action. Finally, the British Chamber, we've been in the China market for over 40 years since reform and opening up. And we know that sustainability and climate action is a multilateral effort. It's not an island of cooperation. So we really do need to make sure that all aspects of our multilateral relationship are in place. So that is people to people, businesses to businesses, and government to government. Only with this, then we can truly work in lockstep and to be able to achieve our goal, global goal towards net zero and decarbonization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Very succinct, but thorough and compelling. Last but certainly not least, we have Xiaju Song, who is the president of international business at United Imaging Healthcare, responsible for international markets. Dr. Xia has over 2 decades of global business leadership experience in medical device and the medical device and technology industry in critical functions ranging from sales and marketing, strategy, business development, as well as R&D management. He received his PhD in organic chemistry and biomaterials from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Dr. Xia, please, joining us online.
Okay, thank you for the nice introduction, and also really appreciate for this great chance to interact with everyone here. So as you know, China and Europe are always the partners, especially in our field. A little bit of background of the United Imaging Healthcare. So we are a 11 years old company started by about 2011. So we are playing in the field of the diagnostic imaging and radiotherapies, just like in most of the hospital, the biggest or more kind of expensive equipment are those the MRI, CT, PET-CT, and the LINAC. And so we are an innovator in this field. So over the past 11 years, we have launched over 100 the product in those 5 categories. And many of them are, we believe, are in the industry's front page. So some of the very innovative technologies we introduced to the market. Some of the technology, if we talk about the sustainable growth, is we significantly reduce when the patient's exam time and or reduce the drugs needed to do the contrast. One of the technology we introduced, for example, at the beginning of 2019, we called it the U-Explorer, which is the technology when we detect cancer, because we have a few of the speakers mentioned the cancer treatment. So the PET-CT, we can detect the cancer. Usually you need to do the FDG, which is a tracking agent. And but for this one, we can reduce the agents, this agent drug by almost 40 times. And also for the patient exam time, we can reduce for like about 30 times. So also the radiation. So all of this means we can use much less of energy or time to do the cancer detection. So this technology actually was named by Science and Nature as one of the 10 technology breakthroughs in 2018. So over the past 10 years, so we provide not only the capital equipment, but also the cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and also like 3D printing. And we're also operating about a dozen the diagnostic imaging centers, including one in Shanghai, one in Beijing. So Those products, all of this in every category, we have the CE and the FDA. So currently we are commercializing in about 40 some countries. And especially for some of the technology, if we, everyone, I think we cannot skip the topic of the COVID-19. So during the COVID-19, if I think in China, everyone probably familiar with the long kind of the infection. So one of the recommended technology is using the CT to check the lung if this is a true COVID or is a normal lung infection. So in the, especially in the 2020, and the CT was in high demand. So we also, as a company, we work with the global agencies and also the China, the Red Cross. We supported over 20 countries, send our United Imaging CTs to help detect the COVID-19 patients, including in like US and Poland and Iraq, Ukraine, Bosnia, Nepal, and across the different group. So if we look at that kind of the sustainable growth and how we can collaborate, especially with Europe, because I think if we look at that technology and from the X-ray and development or inventions and to the current kind of the medical standard of being setting, European was a pioneer. So what we hope United Imaging as a challenger for the technology, especially for this diagnostic imaging area. So we hope our innovation can work closely with the clinicians and the researchers across from Europe and China. So we can either speed up or increase the kind of the accuracy of the cancer detection or reduce the patients and the stay in the hospital the time in terms of how long you need to do your checkup. And so this is a part that I think we are currently from the corporate perspective are currently spend more time are doing. So we already set up close to 2 dozens of the offices around the globe, including one in Poland, and we're setting another one in Italy because Italy we have a lot of hospitals now doing collaboration with us now. And another part is I think in terms of the we could collaborate more between China, especially we United Imaging with Europe, is from the not only the clinical application, but from the research, for example, from the animal, from the drug development, from the preclinical to clinical, because United Imaging, we are currently probably is the only company in the global the stage. We provide integrated, which is the diagnostic imaging equipment, and from the same platform. So we have the MR, CT, PET-CT, and from the preclinical to the clinical application under the same platform. So in the past, there's other companies are using different platforms. I think this help to work with the drug development, just like a drug agent, like the Merck or Beijing, and the two speakers mentioned before. So we hope we can accelerate the theranostic or the other drug kind of the development process. So what the future we as a company we can see is I know there are a lot of geopolitics challenges and also the COVID-19. I think especially I think in China and currently the strict COVID-19 measures which hindered some of the especially interpersonal exchanges. So, but what we hope is the pandemic will be over very soon, and we can resume back to the collaboration as like a norm, like before 2019. So since the United Imaging, when we actually started this company, we have a very clear vision. Is we want to lead the healthcare innovation, which currently we are delivering some of the result, and also with a very noble mission of bringing equal healthcare for all. So this lives in over 8,000 employees now and within United Imaging Group. So we hope we will, in the next years to come, to increase our collaboration between China and between United Imaging and also our European customers and partners and friends. And so we can basically accelerate or take the healthcare to the next level. So again, thank you CCG for organizing this event, and we are very honored to have this chance to interact with leaders in different fields. So hope we can work together for the contribute to the common goal of the sustainable growth and also improve the healthcare for more people and in more places. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Xia. Thank you in particular for sharing more about your company, the technological breakthroughs it's made, as well as your contributions to alleviating some of the symptoms of COVID. So this brings us to the end of our event today. I'd like to briefly summarize by first thanking George Wutka from the European Chamber, Song Yongfu, and Alan Gabor of Merck. All three of you leaders in your field, sharing not only your expertise, but also the accomplishments of your organizations and what you're doing to contribute to a more productive and harmonious China-EU relationship. I'd also like to thank all of our other panelists here today, both in person and online. Your insights, your perspective were very much valued. I know for myself, I learned a lot. I'm sure that our audience online as well did too. And as with the panel this morning, these sharings will be digested, processed, and shared to a much wider audience than just the people that were here today. So we'll end here today. Thank you very much. And to our audience online, thank you for watching and listening.